Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. We begin this hour in Washington, where a former Facebook employee is calling on Congress to enact tougher regulations on the social media platform. Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen testified before the Senate Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, Product Safety, and Data Security. Haugen is accusing the social media giant of a lack of transparency in how it promotes content and misinformation across its platforms. In addition, she says Facebook has known its app, Instagram, has been harmful to mental health and well-being. Facebook has publicly denied any allegations. Its apps have a negative impact on the mental health of its young users. However, recently released internal information conducted by the company suggests otherwise. Earlier, Senate Subcommittee Chairman and Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal addressed the company's internal findings.
Facebook and big tech are facing a big tobacco moment, a moment of reckoning. The parallel is striking. I sued Big Tobacco as Connecticut's Attorney General. I helped to lead the states in that legal action, and I remember very, very well the moment in the course of our litigation when we learned of those files that showed not only that Big Tobacco knew that its product caused cancer, but that they had done the research, they concealed the files, and now we knew, and the world knew, and big tech now faces that Big Tobacco jaw-dropping moment of truth.
Haugen's testimony comes a day after a global outage across all Facebook platforms that lasted for hours. CBS News' Skylar Henry has more.
Whistleblower Frances Haugen appeared before Congress to say Facebook knew about the harm its products were causing, but placed profits ahead of safety.
I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy.
Haugen, who worked as a product manager on the civic misinformation team for 2 years, told lawmakers Facebook ignored its own evidence that Instagram was creating body image problems for teens.
Engagement-based ranking on Instagram can lead children from very innocuous topics like healthy recipes to anorexia promoting content over a very short period of time.
Haugen says Facebook research also shows its product is used to undermine democracy, pointing out the misinformation that led to the January 6th Capitol assault and the COVID vaccine skepticism.
The dangers of engagement-based ranking are that Facebook knows that content that elicits an extreme reaction from you is more likely to get a click, a comment, or reshare.
Lawmakers are looking at ways the government can better regulate Facebook and other social media sites, something that appears to have bipartisan support.
If they won't act, and if big tech won't act, Congress has to intervene.
I've been arguing for some time that it is time for Congress to act.
Facebook says it wants Congress to provide more regulation.
We do think that regulation is important, so that there is somebody outside of us validating our work.
The company also told CBS News, "We continue to make significant improvements to tackle the spread of misinformation and harmful content." Skylar Henry, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Joining us now for more on this is David Kirkpatrick, the founder and editor-in-chief of Techonomy and author of The Facebook Effect, the inside story of the company that is connecting the world. David, welcome. Thank you for joining us. What has been your biggest takeaway so far from today's testimony?
Well, I'd say the single biggest takeaway is that finally someone is speaking publicly with eloquence and in a way that people understand about what could be done to address the problems that Facebook presents to society. We've heard an awful lot about the problems, and Frances Haugen is starting to tell us, at least in her opinion, what we could do about it. That's a big deal.
And we did hear Senator Blumenthal say this is big tech's big tobacco moment. We all know how that turned out for big tobacco, but big tech and social media have been under scrutiny for years. So what do you think makes this moment any different, or is it any different? Doesn't Congress, bear some of the blame over the lack of action taken to regulate these platforms, even when these platforms have expressly asked for some sort of oversight?
Well, they haven't asked for real oversight, in my opinion, but certainly Congress and government in general should have acted much sooner as a small number of companies came to have such inordinate influence in our society. On the other hand, there is a difference now, and I think it may potentially result in a significant change in how the reaction of Congress and society. And that is that, she brought the documents. And when you have documents, you basically can prove your allegations. There's been many accusations made against Facebook over recent years. And the company continually takes a image-oriented response and contests everything. It's hard for them to really contest some of the data that she's revealed because it's their own data, and it's damning.
Right, and she's brought it with her, as you say. She's got the documentation, as senators noted. Facebook's product optimization and algorithms were at the center of today's hearing. Hougen says the social media is organized to focus on profit over public safety, impacting its platform's most vulnerable users the most. Tell us specifically what type of regulations she is proposing, because we know a lot of the lawmakers listening to her today were concerned with things like privacy, et cetera. So what is she proposing that Congress might be able to actually move forward with?
Well, she's more concerned with structural matters, and the single thing she keeps talking about is transparency, which I think is a very well-chosen word on her part. That companies, Facebook's actions are opaque by design, even more, in her opinion, and in her statements to Congress, than Google or Pinterest, where she previously worked. And that if Facebook were forced to reveal the inner workings of the decision-making it makes and its algorithms make, which I think is quite possible, I think government and law could do that, then we would at least know what was going wrong, and it would be easier to regulate and remediate that. And it would also allow Facebook to be held to account.
And do you think that if these algorithms are made public or they are more transparent in some way, that would force Facebook to adjust the algorithms?
Yes, I do think that. I mean, I think if we saw how Facebook's algorithms worked, and it's hugely complicated. They have so many algorithms. It would take a lot of work to figure out how to present that to the public. But we would be horrified. I mean, absolutely. As she said, and as the senator said today, they have consistently chosen profits over people. And that's manifested in the design of their systems. So if their systems were more transparent, I think they would ultimately be forced to be a little more people-centric, so to speak. The problem, though, is that doing that would result in significant hit to their earnings and revenues, perhaps, and their stock price growth. And that could cause significant business problems for them separately, which is why they don't want to do it and will only do it if forced.
Of course. Well, and that's sort of what happened to the tobacco industry, correct? When, it was the tobacco industry that came under congressional oversight in the way that it did. That industry as well took a big hit.
Yeah, well, and they continue to take a big hit. A lot of those companies essentially went away. And, Kevin Roos in the New York Times wrote a column in the last day or so, more or less saying Facebook is beginning a long, slow decline, which always happens in technology. And I don't necessarily agree that that's happening already, but it could happen. Look, if society comes to believe that Facebook causes more harm than good, then it will ultimately be forced to go away. However, if you look at yesterday's outage and the response to that and the alarm that it caused all over the world among people who could no longer do business, Facebook is part of the infrastructure of modern life. So ultimately, we don't really want it to go away. We want it to be better governed.
Right. David Kirkpatrick, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.